About the history of Methodism in Chambersburg, 225 years. Tradition states that Daniel and Ellen Madeira came to Chambersburg in 1793 from Baltimore, Maryland, which may or may not have been a coincidence, since only 9 years prior to that, Methodism was brought to America through the auspices of John Wesley. Wesley sent his emissary, Thomas Coke, to Baltimore, Maryland to ordain Francis Asbury at Lovely Lane Chapel in Baltimore in 1784 and establish the Methodist Episcopal Church in America, just as we were declaring our new country, America, and the birth of Franklin County. It was formed in 1784 also. The home of the Madeiras was on Lincoln Way East. Then it wasn't known as anything because it was barely a street. It was between 2nd and 3rd Streets, somewhere between what today is the Chambers Apothecary and the telephone company. It was here that Charles Burgoon came from Frederick, Maryland, and held worship services in their home. At that time, there was no settled land east of this. 3rd Street was not cut in, and there was no Lincoln Way. It was a wooded area where wolves roamed close to the few homes that were there. In 1797, Daniel Madeira bought, in 1797, Daniel Madeira bought a lot on East Queen Street and transferred the title to 5 trustees, which built a simple log house of worship, completed by 1799 with a burial ground behind it. Now this is the church, or this is the home that's standing today. This is a view of how it may have been then. The first and only interment was a John Faulkner, whose remains were supposedly moved later. But in 1802, someone tried to burn it by throwing fire into the walnut pulpit. The perpetrator did not succeed at that time. From the beginning, Methodists held religious meetings at night. Evidently, this appeared to be indecent by the other denominations already here. And it took until 1830 when other denominations started holding their services at night too. The small group began to increase and found the need to expand. By 1809, a public appeal for subscriptions was made, and a lot was purchased on the corner of Queen and 2nd Streets to be closer to the downtown area, what we would say today. It was only, the town consisted of a very few streets. The building was of brick, 1 story, 1 room, and no gallery. There is a story that as the building was going on, an older gentleman came by and wanted to know what was being built. When told it was a Methodist church, he claimed that a corn crib would hold them before long. Tradition states that by 1811 it was finished and Bishop Asbury dedicated it on October 8th of that year, but the dedication was held in the local courthouse so it could accommodate more people. This is a representation of the local courthouse. In 1813, a poor fund was established to help the needy. This was our first mission, and it didn't do well. In 1823, love tickets were introduced. Only the faithful could attend this very sacred service. Methodists were very strict and had to adhere to certain principles, like you had to attend one night meeting between the Sabbaths. Several people were expelled in 1823 for things like levity, slander, immoral conduct, drunkenness, wife beating, and selling beer on the Sabbath. In the 1830s, the preacher reported 80 scholars were attending Sunday school. Chambersburg was growing, and so was the membership of the church. By 1845, the need to expand was certain. The trustees decided to tear down the 1811 building and rebuild a structure of brick and stone, 77 feet long, 45 feet wide, and 3 stories high. The basement was slated for a lecture room and classrooms. The second story had side galleries and could seat 150 to 200 people. It was dedicated in 1847. From this date to 1865, records were lost in the burning of Chambersburg. The church escaped burning mainly because the Confederate officers were Masons and the Masonic temple was adjacent to the church, so neither one was touched. Missions were part of this growing church, and one person in particular stands out. Her name is Elizabeth Shryock. This is the window that was lost in the fire, but it's a reproduction, and it was placed in the narthex, between the narthex and the sanctuary. By 1896, the church needed to expand. An attempt to purchase the properties next to the church on Queen Street that was owned by the Masons, but it was voted down. So the church fathers turned to the other side on the east. The sanctuary was built on the eastern part, and the former church was remodeled with a Sunday school. In 1915, additions were added on 2nd Street for the primary department and the men's class. In 1939, there was a great year for Methodism, and the conference was held in Kansas. Representatives of the Methodist Episcopal Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church South, and the Methodist Protestant Church met and changed many controversial issues. Now, lay representation would be present. Missionaries would be sent to Japan, China, and India. Women ministers had full clergy recognition, and values were placed on all individuals as human beings. So we were now one church, the Methodist Church, no longer referred to as the Methodist Episcopal Church. In the early 1950s, 2 properties were bought east of the church. The trustees were thinking ahead as the church school was growing. So in 1957, in place of these 2 properties, a new Christian education building designed just for children and youth was completed. Then, in 1968, something else happened, another merger. The First Evangelical Lutheran Brethren Church, Park Avenue EUB Church, and the Methodist Church merged to form the United Methodist Church. To differentiate between the 3 Methodist churches, our congregation voted to name it St. Paul United Methodist Church. This is 1968. In 1995, arsonists destroyed a major portion of the church, which could not be saved. To rebuild at the same location or to find another place to build a new one caused much consternation among the congregation. The pastor, P. Posey, and the trustees made a good argument to move to another location where the church could expand. Decision weekend took place in June of 1995, and by October, a deconsecration service took place. In April of 1996, members erected a large cross off 5th Avenue in a field, marking the site of the new church. Later, it was moved to its present spot, with the cross surrounded by Jesus' disciples and those close to him in this life. The groundbreaking service took place in May of 1996, with members looking forward to the new building on Norland Avenue. Building commenced and took almost 2 years to complete, but various items saved from the fire included one memorial window, Jesus with the children. It was placed by the Girls Friendly Society, and it's now located in the chapel. The organ was purchased from St. Paul Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., for which it was originally built in 1890. The first service in the new building was held in October of 1997 in this room, celebrating 200 years of Methodism in Chambersburg. The first service in the nave was held in April of 1998. With appreciation to Jean Hoke and Mike Borean for helping me to add to the church history for the next 24 years, recognizing mission and service, which includes starting a furniture ministry, mission trips to hard-hit areas, the beginning of the contemporary service in 2001, raising $65,000 for a Habitat for Humanity house, and starting the Red Cross blood drive, just to name a few. So St. Paul has grown in many ways, continuing to fulfill the church's mission to honor God and make disciples of Jesus Christ, leaving an inspiring legacy for the future. Thank you.